Hey, it's Michelle, your CXC Biology Tutor. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I am going to be looking at the new updated CSEC Human and Social Biology syllabus, particularly with focus on the new SBA component. Because before there was no SBA component, now there is. So if you're not aware, the syllabus has been revised and it is available for download on the CXC store. So you can go and check that out if you have not already done so. So the new syllabus objectives will be effective for exams from May-June 2022. So those who are doing January 2022 exams, they would still be using the old syllabus. So this is just for those students who are doing exams from May-June 2022. So you can go and check out the syllabus and see the new objectives. For the most part, there has been some changes, but nothing major to the entire syllabus. We have the same sections and so forth. So you can go and watch the video that I would have on the subject overview for HSB. Pretty much all of those topics are the same, but you can go through the syllabus and you may notice some minor changes and new additions to the syllabus. Alright, so what I really want to focus on is the SBA component, because that's completely new. So this is the first time human and social biology students will be doing an SBA component. So the SBA paper 031, so this is really for those students who are going to be in schools, who are in a recognized institution. So this is the equivalent to the paper, to the SBAs that you would do if you were doing biology. So you would do labs and so forth. The only difference here is that instead of actually doing labs within the laboratory at school, a certain specific set of labs that you should know, you are going to be conducting a research project. So you're going to have a report to write up. So that is how the SBA would be formatted. So it is in the form of a research project. So candidates will be required to conduct research on a current health-related or environmental issue and its socio-economic impacts in their territory. So that is how the SBA paper 031 would be formatted. So remember, this is only for students who are in school or who are attending a recognized educational institution. Now, private candidates, we're going to get to you shortly. You will be doing a different paper, the alternative paper. So I just want to talk a little bit about this paper here for those who are in school. So as it says, you would be focusing on a health-related and environmental-based, an environmental problem that is happening in society, in your community, or whatever. So I just threw out some ideas here so you get an idea of what type of topics you can approach this project. For instance, these topics would mostly come from Section D and Section E on the syllabus, because those sections focus on diseases and human activities and how they impact the environment. So those topics from those two sections would be what you can go through, and then you can decide on a topic that you would like to study, that you would like to conduct the research. And of course, you would have to be approved by your teacher. So all of that information, all those guidelines would be found within the actual syllabus. Now, I'm just throwing out, as I said, some possible examples of project ideas. So you can do research on communicable diseases, how they affect the community, how they affect people. So a good example would be the COVID-19 pandemic and its effects. So that's definitely, I can see that being a very popular topic. Then there's non-communicable diseases. So you can look at different approaches, different types of diseases, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, obesity. So those are the common ones that you should know on the syllabus. And then you can look at effects of pollution. So this would be under section E. So there's water pollution, air pollution, land pollution. And then closely connected would be looking at poor solid waste management in communities. So we know that's definitely an issue. So you're really looking for problems that are happening in society today, and you're looking to basically make recommendations on how this problem can be solved, how it can be dealt with. So you're literally going to be doing a lot of research and analysis. So how the paper 031 will be formatted. So this is the format of the report, and all of this is outlined in the actual syllabus, but I'm just summarizing it here. So obviously when you're doing a report or project, you should have a cover page that would have your name and so forth, all that important information. Table of contents. So you can't have a project without a table of contents. Introduction, so that's going to give you background information on the project that you're doing. The statement of the problem, so whatever issue it is you are focusing on, you're going to state a problem. The research objective, so what it is you're trying to find by carrying out this research. What is the aim of the project? So then with the methodology, so those that would involve the data collection methods, also including research limitations, things that might affect the actual research procedures. So that would be the methodology. And then, of course, presentation of data. So whatever information you have collected, you need to be able to display it in the form of tables and charts, graphs, etc. So that would be the presentation of data. And then, of course, following that, you would have to give an analysis and interpretation of the data. So you would need to do that. And then finish up your project with a conclusion, recommendations, reflection, bibliography, and appendices. So as I said, all of the information, further details will be shown in the actual syllabus. Okay, so that is the first paper. So these are for students who are in school or recognized educational institution. So even if you're a private candidate, but you are in a recognized educational institution where the teachers can actually monitor your work and give you guidelines regarding the project, the research project, then you'll be doing this paper. Now, for private candidates, so those who may be studying on their own, most adult learners, school leavers, so this paper would be for you. So this is the alternative to the school-based assessment. So as I said, it's for private candidates only. So this would be a written paper that will take the form of a case study. So you would have related questions that will examine the same skills as those tested in paper 031. So the same issues that the paper 031 would be dealing with, so that project, so health-related problems, environmental-related problems. The paper 032 would take the form of a case study concerning such problems. And so it literally is just like what you can say a concise version to the research project, of course. So obviously you're not conducting the research in this case, but you'll be answering questions based on some information and some data that would be given. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through the specimen paper that was available in the syllabus. I'm just going to go through it so you see exactly how you would go about answering the questions on this paper 032, so this alternative paper. So the specimen paper given is 1 hour and 15 minutes and consists of 12 questions. So I'm going to look at that right now. Okay, so here we have the actual specimen paper for the paper 032. So we can see that it's 1 hour and 15 minutes, and you have to answer 12 questions based on a case study. So you have to answer all the questions. So there's no selection, no choice. All the questions you need to do. All right, so let's go on to look at the question. So the instructions given, the following case study contains information for a research project. So as you can see right away, the similarity between this alternative paper and the actual project that students in school would have to do. So it's going to be based on a health-related issue, an environmental-related issue that's going on in the country, the town, community, whatever the case is of a particular Caribbean country. So here you're asked to read the case and answer the questions that follow each section. So we have the background information, so you're seeing similarities already. So in the research project, you should start off with background information related to the actual project you're doing. So here it says the town of Castries, located at the base of a mountain range, is usually supplied with water from a well. The well has run dry and an alternative water source is needed. So we're seeing an issue that is shown here. So a well running dry, you need an alternative water source to depend on. So the government is considering 5 rivers that run through the mountain range and as potential sources of potable water. So water that can be used for consumption. So each river differs primarily on land usage patterns as follows. So we have a list of the different rivers and the type of usage around that area, around the river. So here we have the Shanshich River that flows through an area where there are many pig farms. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight some of the information here. So this river is running through an area with many pig farms. The Black Bear River flows through an untouched forest that has not been disturbed in any way. So you know when you're doing research, you want to highlight any important information. So this is going to come in useful when you're going to approach the questions and answer them to the best of your ability. So highlight the important information. So the Caroni River flows through 2 other towns before reaching Castries. So we have 2 other towns, so that's associated with the Caroni River. The Deuce River flows through a deforested region where logging occurs. So deforestation would have happened, you have logging occurring, so lots of trees that have been cut down. And then the final river, the Demerara River, flows through agricultural land. So agricultural land, so you're thinking farming. So maybe a farmer is growing crops, using a lot of fertilizers and pesticides and all of that. So these are things that you take into consideration as you are going to approach the case study. And then this would allow you to answer the questions. So it says here you are employed by the government of Castries to investigate the quality of water in these rivers and to make a recommendation as to which river should be used to supply the town's water. So we see our recommendation here, so I'm just going to underline that. So they're trying to figure out which of these rivers, because remember they're looking at an alternative water source. So going back here, I didn't highlight it before, but the problem is the well that they usually depended on is running dry. So they need an alternative water source. So here, the whole purpose of this case study obviously then is to find out which of these rivers would be best suitable to supply the town's water. So potable water, that is, because that is what we need to consume. Okay, so it says, first question, write a suitable statement of the problem. So when you are conducting a research project, you will be required to actually give a suitable statement of the problem, of the issue at hand. So the problem here, as observed, you can see that from the information provided on the rivers, obviously human activities will be playing a major role in in determining the quality of the water that the river would provide. So that would be the statement of the problem. So human activities, there are different types. So the pig farming, the actual the town. So going back to the information I would have underlined. So human activities affect the quality of river waters in the town of Castries. So that would be the statement of the problem. So the second question says state the objective of the investigation. What are we trying to find out? What are we trying to determine? Why are we carrying out this investigation? So we're trying to determine the quality of water for each of the 5 rivers in Castries, and then make a recommendation for which one will be best suited to supply the town's water. So that's the whole purpose of the investigation. So that would answer question 2. So let's look now at the next set of questions. So we went from the background. Now we're looking here at the methodology. So remember, this is related to the actual data collection, how you're going to go about collecting your information. So in conducting your research, you tested the water in each river for the presence of the following contaminants. So nitrates, phosphates, suspended sediments, E. coli bacteria. So those are the different contaminants that you will be testing for. So it says to identify the primary method of data collection used in the study. So it just said that you're conducting tests on the water. So the data is going to be collected using chemical or biological tests, experiments. So it's experimental data that you would be collecting. So you have to conduct some kind of experiment, some kind of test to get the information needed. So for part 4, question 4 says to describe the process by which the water in the rivers could be tested to determine the presence of E. coli bacteria. So you now have to outline this specific process of trying to test the water for E. coli bacteria. So this ties back into an objective in the actual syllabus that you should know about. So testing water for the presence of bacteria. So that's where you're going to apply your knowledge here. So you're going to just list the steps. So first of all, we collect a sample of water from each river. So it'd be good to get some like test tubes. Then you're going to use a sterilized loop, streak water samples onto separate sterile agar plates and cover down immediately to avoid any contamination. Secure the lid with an adhesive tape. So those are our first 2 steps. So you collect the sample of water from each of the rivers, put them in the test tubes. So for each sample, you're going to do this obviously separately. So you're making sure your loop is sterilized. So you usually would have like a metal loop. You normally would probably heat it, maybe wipe it down with some alcohol. And you're going to streak the water sample onto the separate sterile agar plate. So they have to be separate. You don't go and swipe the different water samples on the same agar plate. So you have one water sample, say from the Caroni River, the other from the Demerara River, so forth. So you have the separate agar plates for each of the water samples, and as soon as you're finished streaking the water samples, you cover down immediately to avoid any contamination, because you don't want anything coming in and affecting your results. So that's why you cover it down quickly, and then you secure the lid with adhesive tape just to make sure that nothing sneaks in. So the next step now will be to incubate the inoculated agar plates for a period of about 24 to say 48 hours at 25 degrees Celsius. So this is the ideal temperature that if there's any bacteria present, they would thrive and they would reproduce. So that conditions would be good temperature for any growth, bacterial growth. So then after the period of incubation, you're going to take the plates now and observe them, and then you're going to count the number of E. coli colonies seen on the surface of the agar. So obviously that gives you an idea of the presence and the amount of E. coli bacteria present present for each river, for each of the river waters. So obviously, as I said, these sets should be done for each of the 5 rivers being investigated. So that would be our process. So that is 8 marks. Okay, so now we're moving on to question 5. So it says to state one limitation of the method of data collection used. So a limitation usually would be something that is out of our control when we're performing the investigation. So a good example would be when the data is actually collected. So the type of data collected will be dependent on if it is the wet season or the dry season. So those are the environmental factors there. So the climate, the type of weather that would affect the quality of water in some way. It may have some effect on that. So the actual data, the information that is collected during the investigation would be determined on based on the type of season. So if there's a lot of water, a lot of rain falling versus if it outside is very dry, not much rain. So that can affect the actual collection methods and the actual results that you get. Okay, so now going on to the presentation of data. So you can see here now the results of the tests carried out on the water from each river are presented in Table 1. So remember, presentation of data can take the form of tables, charts, so it could be pie chart, graphs. So those are the key different ways that you can present your information. So here we have Table 1 showing the results of the tests of water from the rivers. So we have listed here the contaminants. So the contaminants here are the nitrates and phosphates, total sedimentation, suspension, and then E. coli colonies per 100 mils. So we have the actual results given for each of the rivers. So it says here for question 6, using the grid provided on page 7, plot a bar graph of the data for E. coli colonies per 100 mils presented in Table 1. So they're testing to see that you know how to plot a graph. So remember, it's a bar graph. A bar graph usually would have bars that have spaces in between them because it is discontinuous data that you are really plotting here. So that's the key thing to note. So this is how our graph should appear. So here we have on the y-axis the number of E. coli colonies per 100 milliliters. And then on the x-axis we have the name of the river. So we have the Shanshich, the Back Bay, Caroni, Deuce, and the Demerara. So it's just a matter of taking the information from the table and then plotting the graph. So as you can see, the bars are evenly separated, so they're not touching. I have a suitable scale, so I'm going up in 100s. So go from 0 right up to 1000 because the highest amount, so if you go back to the table, you will see that the highest amount is actually 900. So these are the results that we're using from the table to plot our graph. So it's not the whole table, so you have to understand that we're just focusing on the E. coli colonies per 100 mils. So that is the information that we're using to plot the graph. So our graph should look like this. Okay, so now going back to the next question. So graph is plotted. Question 7 says to suggest one other way in which the data could be presented. So when they're talking about the data, they're talking about all the different information, obviously from the table. So not just the E. coli colonies, but generally what are some other means of presenting data. So line graph is a possibility. So you can use line graph, pie chart. That might be a little difficult to create for such information, but a line graph would be a good option. All right, let's go on to the next set of questions. So we're now going into the analysis and the interpretation of data part. So we have here The acceptable levels of phosphates in potable water should not exceed 14 milligrams per mil. So then it says here the acceptable levels of nitrates in potable water should not exceed 15 milligrams per mil. So these are important information that we need to highlight. So we're dealing with phosphates here. The acceptable level should not go over 14 milligrams per liter. For nitrates, it should not go over 50 milligrams per liter. And the acceptable levels of suspended sediments in the potable water should not exceed 10 milligrams per liter. So Table 2 categorizes the quality of river water by the number of colonies of E. coli bacteria per 100 ml. So we have another table here. So the category excellent, good, fair, intermediate, poor. So obviously poor meaning that is so much E. coli, so much bacteria present in the water that it definitely would not be suitable for consumption, or you're going to have a lot of work to get rid of that bacteria. So excellent is what is the ideal amount of colonies that you would find per 100 ml. So that's 0 to 49. So then poor quality would be anything over 300 ml. So just keep that in mind there. Okay, so question 8 says using the information in Table 1 and Table 2, complete Table 3 by using a tick to indicate where the levels of contaminants in each river meet acceptable levels. So we have to look at the information that we just highlighted. So for the phosphates, the nitrates, the suspended sediments, as well as the E. coli bacteria. So I've already completed the table here. So in terms of the river profiles, so the nitrates, so you have to go back to the actual information on the previous page. So we go here. So looking at the nitrates, you can see that the nitrates level for the Shanshich River, 1.34, Black Bay, 0.94, Caroni, 1.15, and so forth. So let's look at these levels. Are any of these acceptable? So they have to be, so going back to the information, they have to be under 14 milligrams per liter. So all of these fit the bill. You know, they're acceptable because they do not exceed 14 milligrams. So that is basically how you're going to approach this, filling out this table. So let me just use another example. I'm not going to go through all, but similarly here with the phosphates, so I have all of them ticked off. All the rivers meet acceptable levels of contaminants. So going back, alright, so the nitrate should not exceed 50 milligrams. So I made a mistake there just now. So the nitrate should not exceed 50 milligrams per liter. So for sure, the rivers are all clear on that. They're all acceptable because they're way below that amount. And now for the phosphates, it should not exceed 14 milligrams per liter. So going back to that, so the phosphates here, all of them are way below 14 milligrams. So you can see all of them are 0 point something. The Demerara is 1.4. So all of them are below the levels. So you basically just continue to look at the information provided and complete the table as I have here. So obviously now looking at the total suspended sediments, only the Black Bear River meets acceptable standards. For the E. coli bacteria, only the Black Bear River and the Deuce River meets the acceptable standards. So you're going back and forth with the other table on the other slide, the other page, and just matching it up with the information given here. So you're really analyzing the data. Okay, so that is question 8. So that's 5 marks. So let's look at question 9. So it says to identify the river which has the highest level of E. coli bacteria present in the water and suggests one likely reason for this occurrence. So I have the Shanxi River, so that has the highest amount. So if you go back now to the table, you can clearly see that that has the most E. coli. So that is 900 per 100 milliliters. So for sure that is the highest. So the next part of the question asks to give a likely reason for this occurrence. So remember, you're still analyzing and interpreting the information provided. So this river is likely to have such high amounts of bacteria because of the presence of sewage or manure that could have run off from the pig farms in the area. So remember, we had that information way at the beginning. So at the beginning it said here the Shanxi River flows through an area where there are many pig farms. So this is how we're using the information and connecting it to the data that is there. So pig farms, you would think that the pigs are going to be stooling a lot, producing feces, so all that manure, there's a likelihood that, say, when the rain falls, it can wash away some of that manure into the rivers. So that would be responsible, more than likely, would be responsible for the high amounts of bacteria found in the Shanxi River. So the next part 2, identify the river which has the highest amount of suspended sediments present in the water and suggest one likely reason for this occurrence. So the Deuce River has the highest amount of suspended sediments. So if you go back down to the graph, to the table, sorry. So highest amount of suspended sediments. So that would be 31. So that's the highest number there. So the reasoning for that, so let's find out, let's go back to find out what the Deuce River, where the Deuce River is located. So the Deuce River flows through a deforested region where logging occurs. So you can put 2 and 2 together. So if you having a lot of trees being cut down, you're going to end up with a lot of soil erosion. So it's very easy now for the soil to be washed off and then end up in the Deuce River. So that is how you can have such high amount of sediments being in the river. So could be even debris from the actual logging process, cutting down the trees. So all of these things you can consider as a suggestion when you're answering the question. So then part 3, identify the river which has the highest level of phosphates and nitrates present in the water and suggest one likely reason for this occurrence. So the highest levels of phosphates and nitrates that is found in the Demerara River, and that ran through agricultural land. So if you go back to that slide, you will see that it was found within the agricultural land. So you would expect that fertilizers containing the phosphates and nitrates, they can run off into the river, hence causing the increase in these minerals found in the water. So that's the explanation there. So part B, in the river with high levels of nitrates and phosphates, eutrophication is likely to occur. So you should know what eutrophication is. So I just added that here. So it's the overgrowth of algae on the surface of the water. So due to the buildup of the nitrates and the phosphates. So the nitrates and phosphates, they are literal nourishment nutrients for the algae, and that's going to cause them to overgrow, to grow and grow, to flourish. So they literally will cover the surface of the water. So the surface of the river will be covered, and this is going to have a negative impact on the whole river ecosystem. So all the fish and other organisms in the river, low-lying plants down in the river, whatever the case is. So it can affect the survival of these organisms. So one social and one economic implication for the town of Castries. So social. So this is going to relate to, obviously activities interrelating with other fun. So that can affect the recreational activities that perhaps maybe tourists may enjoy doing. They may go to the river, may like swimming in the river or sailing, canoeing, kayaking, whatever the case is. They may avoid these recreational activities because of the toxicity of the water. Because when you have high levels of algae, sometimes the algae can be harmful, so they may avoid the area. So that's one social implication. And then when we deal with economic implication, you're looking more related to money, finances, and that kind of stuff. So in terms of that part, if you're gonna have a lot of fish dying off in the river, so persons that are used to fishing from the river, getting their fish supply, now they're gonna have no fish supply, so that's gonna affect their livelihood. They're not gonna be getting sales, so that would be an economic implication. So that is 2 marks. All right, let's go on to the next question. So we're on to the part with recommendations. So question 10. Recommend to the government of Castries the river that would be best suited to provide potable water to the town and give 2 reasons for your recommendation. So is what you think. So based on the results that are given, that you have from the table and all of that, you can then give reasons for why you would recommend that this particular river would be best suitable for potable water. So I have here the Black Bear River will be the one best suited out of the 5 rivers. So first of all, the first reason, it has the least amount of contamination from the mineral salts. So that's the phosphates and the nitrates, and also the suspended particles, the sediments, and it has low amounts of E. coli. So that makes it ideal. So this is going to be second reason, because of such low contamination, it's going to be easier. It's going to be easier for the government to actually clean up the water, purify the water, and make it suitable for consumption. So the cost would be less because there's less work to do in the whole purification process. So those are the reasons that you can give for why the Black Bear River would be the most suitable for providing the potable water. And then it says here in question 11, suggests one other river that the government of Castries could utilize to provide the town with potable water. So justify your recommendation. So I chose the Deuce River, so that would be another option, because it also has relatively low amounts of contamination. So when you look at the table, going back to the results, 3 out of the 4 contaminants are at acceptable levels. So that's a good thing. And it actually has the lowest amount of E. coli present, and the suspended sediment should be fairly easy to remove. So even though it may have large amounts of suspended sediment, so let me just go back here to the table. So we're looking at the Deuce River. So you see here that it has the lowest amount of E. coli colonies. The nitrates and the phosphates levels are low, so they are acceptable. So these three out of 4 of the contaminants are acceptable levels. So it is this one here that may be a little cause for concern, because that's a lot of sedimentation there, sediments that will be suspended in the water, but that is not too bad in terms of being able to remove. So that would not be a serious cause for worry. So the Deuce River could be an alternative river, another option, a second option for producing potable water. And then the final question, question 12, it says, suggest 2 ways in which the waterways of Castries could be improved. So first of all, keeping the pig farms further away from the rivers. So you can literally go back to the beginning of the case study and source the issues, what the problems are, and then come up with some kind of suggestions, solutions for improving the actual rivers. So the first one that comes to mind is making sure that the pig farms are not so close to the rivers so that the manure doesn't easily get into the river. And then secondly, reducing the deforestation. So making sure that there's some kind of regulation on how many trees and how often the trees are cut down. So this will prevent the soil erosion and thus prevent the sediment runoff into rivers. So those are two ways that you can improve the waterways. Those rivers help improve the quality of the water in them. So that completes the SBA paper alternative. So you get an idea of the type of questions that can come. As I said, they're based on health-related issues, environmental-related issues. So hopefully you feel a little more prepared to tackle the SBA component. So whether it is the paper 031 that you do in schools or the alternative paper. So the last thing I just wanted to add before I wrap up this video, in terms of the regulations for January sitting of the exams, please note that all candidates sitting the Human and Social Biology exam at the January sitting for the first time must write the paper 032. So they have to do the alternative paper. So if you're doing it for the first time, so not a repeat candidate or anything, so there's no SBA option, no paper 031 available for our January candidates. So just bear that in mind. So once again, you can get all the information of the revised syllabus. Just go to the CXC's website. I'll put the link below this video.